Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Q&A. I'm here with Maia Lekow and Chris King, the directors of The Letter. And I'm Karen McMullen. I'm the features programmer at Doc NYC, and I'll be leading the Q&A. Welcome, Maia and Chris.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having us, Karen.
You're welcome. They're talking to us from Kenya. So lucky you. Anyway, so what a fascinating film. I saw it early in the programming, season, and I was really blown away with it. I loved the quietness and the intimacy, and the kind of languidly paced, the way the story was allowed to unfold. I thought it was a very beautiful way to attack a story, come to a story. Can you tell us how you came to know about this?
Yeah, so how this journey kind of first began with Chris and myself. Actually, first we should quickly introduce ourselves. So Chris, do you want to introduce yourself?
No, you go.
Okay, so we're a husband and wife team. I'm a Kenyan musician and filmmaker, and Chris is originally from Australia, but he's been here for the last 15 years. And together we have a small production company called Circle and Square Productions. And this was our first feature, The Letter. And how we actually first found this story, or how the story found us, was we were really interested. Like, we read a children's story on a female freedom fighter who at the age of 70 was revolting against the British. And for us, this was for me in particular, because this freedom fighter was from the town where my father's family side is from. And there wasn't much written about her. It was really important to understand more about her. And the fact that she was a woman at the age of 70 during a very patriarchal system and time, who was standing up and fighting for Kenya's freedom. So we then went on this journey and started interviewing a lot of elderly people from this area, which is along the coast of Kenya. And as we were talking to a lot of elders, they were saying to us, that yes, we can tell you about her story. At the same time, we have this issue that's happening now where a lot of elders are being accused of being witches, but, it's about land inheritance, greed and capitalism, pretty much. Mm-hmm. So that's then how our film veered a different direction. And we then were kind of having this issue where we had this many interviews and kind of a much more social issue film, but we still could not, hadn't quite tapped into the personal story that we were looking for. And when we came back to Kenya, we started to Nairobi, sorry. We were going through the interviews, and the language that's spoken along the coast is different to Kiswahili or English. So we were looking for a translator for that particular language, and we were put in touch with Karisa, who is our main character in the film. And as he was going through these interviews, he was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm actually watching this, because this is happening to my grandma now. And I just received a Facebook post from my cousins saying blah, blah, blah. And then that's how then the story began. So we then went with Karisa back to his grandma and spent a substantial amount of time without the camera, just getting to know them. And funnily enough, they live right across the road from where my uncles live, which was something that we then learned later on when we arrived to the town. So, yeah, so that's how it all began.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the most heartwarming pieces in the film is the relationship that Karisa has with his grandmother. It's very, loving and intimate, and the affection is clear. Can you talk about how he is navigating, he does a good job of being, stoic guy, but can you talk about how you think it was affecting him?
Yeah, I mean, when we first met Karisa and traveled back home, I think we could really tell just the way that he was kind of speaking to people and opening people up, that he had a real charisma, and just seeing him interact with his grandma, we found like a really beautiful dynamic between them, which was important to kind of show that sensitivity, because a lot of the other families we're meeting, there was a lot of hostility. So Yeah, finding that connection between the two of them. I think at the beginning we maybe projected a little bit that he would be kind of pushing back, like more than what he did against the accusers, and maybe would be more confrontational. But in the end, his kind of neutrality with both sides of the family, I think, is really what made the film come together and help us kind of speak respectfully with each of the family members. And since the film is finished, it hasn't been released yet in Kenya. We're meant to release in June, but the pandemic has put a spanner in those works. But we have started impact screenings with different focus groups, especially along the coast where this is a big issue. And actually him being in the room and talking about making the film has, yeah, we've seen a kind of activism in a new way come out of him, because people are really bringing out their stories, like meeting him. And
yeah, it was really powerful, these focus groups, and Carissa being in the room, and actually, this being firsthand, and just so many people just broke down crying as they were watching the film, just being like, I can't believe that this just happened to my grandfather last week, or my father, last month or last year. And so many people were just coming out and sharing their story. So I think we kind of remembered why we initially made this film in the first place, after 6 years of sweat and tears and joy and happiness. So yeah, that's kind of gone off a little bit your question, Karen. But
in terms of how it's affected him, I think, yeah, it's still kind of in process.
Yeah, yeah. You've answered it. I won't add.
So what is the current state of these witchcraft accusations? Is there any governmental intervention, or are they growing?
Actually, I think at the moment, like when we were last down there for just starting the impact campaign, I think at the moment they haven't increased and they haven't decreased. And I think it seems to be at a little bit of a plateau.
I mean, we heard of recent cases when we were down there, some deaths that had happened. I think it seems to be plodding along. The government are definitely aware of it, and they're running kind of awareness campaigns, and trying to help, I think, with some of these elderly shelters and help them with resources and things like that. But what we found was missing was more of a kind of psychosocial like approach to understanding like where these issues are coming from
and why.
And I mean, we had some focus groups with religious leaders, and still just felt a little bit frustrated in being able to get through, like from these, like from a religious perspective, we found a lot of resistance about anyone kind of taking any accountability, and the government are not also taking the kind of accountability that you'd hope.
I think also because, so many people believe in witchcraft, that it's actually one of those things that is so intangible. So even the government people that we've spoken to are like, oh, you've been spending time in that shelter. All those elders are witches. And it's just like this kind of like very frustrating cycle where I think we all need to understand like how this began in the first place. And that's, yeah, that's important. And I think that through the film, we were trying to bring that out. We definitely, when we were editing, wanted to add more of that as to, kind of when Christianity came with the missionaries, and how then they were kind of saying that anything traditional is devil worship and satanic, and essentially then wanting to kind of, coerce people into their different congregations. A lot of these things then started at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, because in the film you can kind of see, the collision of the Western, colonization through Western religion mixing with these ancestral practices. And it just seemed very complicated because I think, was it said that they used to ancestrally deal with, you could cleanse witchcraft with this oath taking, and it wasn't, this indictment of a lifelong sentence, correct?
Completely, yeah.
Absolutely, and the power of those of the kind of oathing ceremonies are being completely diminished, because even those are being considered, I guess, going against Christianity, going against Islam. So yeah, the cultural differences are really strong. Sorry, the religious tension is really strong, and only getting stronger as the kind of evangelical movement is growing, and the kind of Wahhabism as well is growing. The traditionalists are kind of caught in the middle, and
being sandwiched.
yeah, really like being demonized.
Mm. And what is the current status of Carissa's grandmother?
So very unfortunately, actually, about a month and a half ago now, she passed away.
Oh.
But she passed away peacefully, and nothing to do with witchcraft. And she was just sitting outside enjoying her house and her little space there.
Thankfully, nothing to do with COVID
and nothing to do with COVID. So she lived 95 years, and I'm so glad that from our side as filmmakers, we were able to capture her spirit and her soul. So yeah.
She had a beautiful big burial, even though it was during the pandemic. I think there were more than like 300 people that came to the Kamango family home, and all of the Anglican church leaders came. The bishop came, Zawadi and Tatu, and even Uncle Faraha, and were there at the funeral. We got to see pictures. We weren't able to travel from Nairobi to get there, but it was definitely a big, beautiful send-off.
She was really an impressive character with her barefoot hoeing and just her quiet strength. I'm very glad you captured that and shared it with the audiences through your film. That is all the time we have to talk to you about your film. Really wonderful piece. Thank you so much for sharing it with the Doc NYC audience, and enjoy Kenya. We'll try and hold it down here in New York. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Karen.
And come and visit East Africa anytime. There's plenty of room.